Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Severe MMA setup. My name is Harry Powell. I'm going to stop doing the running joke now and I'm just going to leave it where it is, but I am not Ian O'Neill. My name is Harry Powell and I'm joined by my good friend, Mr. E. Spencer Kite. You could follow him on all of the things. I usually do this at the end, but I'm actually going to do it at the start. And then, because I sometimes forget by the end, you can follow him on Twitter and or Instagram at Spencer Kite, and you can find his work on UFC.com. You can find it on Sportsnet, and you can find it on Fighters Only. Spencer and I are here to break down UFC Fight Night, Etihad Arena, Abu Dhabi, Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. We've got a grip of fights here, 13 bouts slated on the card. Ton of storylines going in, lots and lots to break down. Before we start, Spencer, how are you?
I'm grand. I'm looking forward to this slate of events. I believe it's an early start time, so that's always exciting. It is on ABC here in North America, which means hopefully we get the ABC gold jackets for the folks calling the shots. And yeah, there's some very interesting fights here, so I'm ready to go.
All right, well, let's start. So, as usual, when we go to the Abu Dhabi area, we have a ton of representation from that specific side of the world. Certainly, the sort of Cossack regions, these sorts of Eastern European areas, and then that far eastern side aren't as heavily represented as they have been in previous cards, but we've got an absolutely fantastic main event. One half has an incredibly large following in that area of the world. The extremely fucking insane co-main event placement, we will get to that, but that obviously has a large representation. And then we've got some fantastic fights in Marlon Vera versus Davison Figueiredo. We've got maybe the saddest fight of 2024 now that Nick Diaz is not fighting Vicente Luque, and that's Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa. We have Mackenzie Dern versus Lupe Godinez, which is a fantastic fight. Joel Alvarez versus Elvis Brenner, which is also a fantastic fight. And then we have the prelims. There are some fights that are happening on those prelims. I will mention some of them now, and we will not cover them in detail. But Alonzo Menefield is fighting Azamat Murzakanov. That's a fight that will happen. Fair play. Mohamed Yahya versus Caio Fernandez is also a fight that's happening. Shamil Gadziev is probably going to finish Dontel Mays. If not, that'll be fucking horrendous for about 14 and a half minutes. Guram Kutladze has a short notice replacement fighter, and that is Jordan Vucenic. We will certainly be spending some time on the epidemic himself. Victoria Dudukova fights Sam Hughes. Jai Herbert fights Rolando Bedoya. We'll spend some time on that. And then Cedric Dumas fights Dennis Tululin to jerk the curtain as they will. Let's kick ourselves off with the main event. Spencer, tell me your thoughts on this main event, purely from a storylines perspective, purely from a divisional relevancy perspective. What does this fight do for you?
I was fascinated to see it last year when it was originally supposed to happen. Remain fascinated to see it this coming weekend. Cory Sandhagen is somebody obviously established as a perennial contender, has fought for the title before, is coming into this fight having switched training camps. He is now working with Trevor Whitman out at the Onyx Labs, still wrestling with Carrington Banks, still has some usual people around him, but has switched up the striking side of things to work with Whitman, who obviously has built a couple UFC champions. You and I have a great deal of respect for. It's a really important fight for Cory. It's also a huge test and a huge moment for Umar Nurmagomedov, who we have for this whole time just sat here and understandably and rightfully thus far said he's the next one, right? Khabib, then Islam came along, and then the next one out of the camp is cousin Umar. And now is let's see if that is where we're ready to be, because earlier this year when he fought on short notice against Bekzat Almakhan, it didn't start so well, and he had to wrestle as opposed to chose to wrestle. And so now we're taking a step up against the guy that presents a lot of things, going to give you a lot of looks, is going to make it real tough for you. And we're going 25, or we might go 25. And so sign me all the way the fuck up. Get this fight into my bloodstream. Let's fucking go.
You spent some time at Onyx Labs with Trevor Whitman and Cory Sandhagen. specifically, what did you notice about the two men's relationship, the relationship they've managed to build, and anything specific about the sort of mental state is the wrong word, but the mental presence of Cory Sandhagen here coming into what is, an absolutely huge test?
So he seemed in great spirits when we were there. I was out, obviously, when I was in Denver for that event. Myself and a colleague, Zach Packleb, went out to shoot Cory a little bit. They put up a piece together that is on UFC.com right now of Cory talking about his first main event in Abu Dhabi against Marlon Moraes. It's a cool little piece. Cool to be around it. I think I tweeted it out earlier today or earlier in the week, so you can go and find that on my Twitter feed. The relationship is really cool to see. Trevor is a very different coach. Obviously, he is somebody that is hyper positive. And so to watch sparring and constantly hear Trevor Whitman from very close proximity, offering those yeses that we've heard a lot and offering that praise that we've heard a lot of, movements and shifts and shots that are landing and choices that are being made from up close is really interesting to see. I think that is a piece that will work and fit really well with Cory Sandhagen, who is a cerebral guy, who is a thoughtful person. Trevor is much more, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. His previous coach, Christian Allen, was a very flowy, was a very, hey, let's just feel it all out. Let's just move and we'll read and react. And Trevor is much more, it's not static, but it's, here's the little things you can do that are going to make those weapons that you have a little bit better. So Christian Allen, it's not very often that you're sitting down on those shots, right? Cory Sandhagen isn't a guy that we routinely think of as sitting down on a right hand and just pounding it into you. Well, he throws it a little harder now that he's working with Trevor Whitman, who says, at points, man, we got to sit down on this, right? We saw that with Rose Namajunas. We saw that with Kamaru Usman and various other fighters that he's worked with throughout the years. I think that part is going to be really interesting. The relationship Cory has with Banks is great. And I think as a trio, as a triumvirate, they're going to be a very successful team. What that translates to into results or championships that we're adding to the wall at Onyx, who knows? But I'm very curious to see in application what it looks like on Saturday, because I think it can be very successful.
I agree. And I think that there's an element here where Umar has not yet fought a level of game planning prowess and a level of cerebral fighter like somebody that Cory Sandhagen is. And I think for me, Cory Sandhagen is somebody that I really enjoy watching fighting. I really enjoy analyzing for those reasons, right? He's a very cerebral fighter. He has his flaws, just like every other fighter. And, those are something that are on display and have been on display in his previous bouts and may still be on display against Umar Nurmagomedov. But I am very interested in the change of camps. I am very interested in what the Nurmagomedov camp brings into this fight, because something that we know from cousin Umar is that the blueprint previously, up until his last performance, has been, we're going to wrestle for 1.5 rounds. We're going to exhaust people for 1.5 rounds. And when they are at an efficiency level of about 60% and I'm at an efficiency level of about 95%, then I'll just do whatever the fuck I want. Basically, if I'd like to throw spinning roundhouse kicks and cartwheel kicks and jump off the wall kicks, it's fine. Just do whatever the fuck you want, basically. And I think if there's something that Khabib has transitioned into so perfectly well as a coach, head coach sort of a role, is that game planning aspect. It seems as though his analysis of fights, of fighters, of styles is really, really sharp. And obviously, the fighters that are in his camp are almost duty bound to listen to him and to follow everything he says in absolute lockstep. And so I think that for cousin Umar, we're going to see a really interesting change in the relationship where this is now fully fledged. Khabib in the camp, Khabib in the driving seat. We've seen some iterations of Khabib filtering in and out before Abdulmanap tragically passed away. Now we are here. It is very much full Khabib in control. This is the whole thing. what do we see? Do we see any nuances? Do we see any changes? Do we see any evolutions? Do we see any iterations? I think for me, overarchingly, the thing that's so interesting about this fight is forget that it's bantamweight and you literally can't put a bad fight together. Forget that it's going to be high pace, high octane, high gas. Forget that it's going to have mad scrambles. I'm just really interested in the strategic battle between the two war camps that sit adorned those sides, peering into their chessboard and watching this thing sort of play out. Do you have anything final to add to that?
I just am fascinated to see these are the kinds of tests that I always want to see for brilliant prospects, right? Umar has never fought anyone even remotely close to Cory Sandhagen's level. This is a massive jump forward from having fought the Hany Barceloses, the Nate Manuses. Cory Sandhagen is capital L legit. And if you beat him, then we're talking championship opportunities.
100%. We have said previously on this program, on programs like this, that card placement means something. Forget everything I have said because I'm clearly wrong. SevereMMA fights Michael Olialanchuk in our co-main event, with Marlon Vera and Davison Figueiredo hanging around just underneath them, and Tony Ferguson, Michael Chiesa hanging underneath them, and then Mackenzie Dern and Lupita Godinez fighting just underneath them. Let's not spend too long, but I think it needs to be mentioned. What the fuck is this fight doing in our co-main event, Spencer Kite?
So, I mean, this fight is in our co-main event because Shara Bullet has a following in the region. He is somebody that was brought into this card when the Nick Diaz Vicente Luque fight, which was, I should add, the co-main event ahead of Marlon Vera and Davison Figueiredo and the rest as well. So also, what the fuck? And so that's why we're here. He is somebody that is going to get, Shara Bullet feels like he's going to get the sort of the Joe Pyfer treatment a little bit of, we're going to let you go and promote you as this guy that everybody's going to watch until you falter, and then we'll dial it back. Thus far, he hasn't faltered, largely because he's fought Bruno Silva and Antonio Trocoli on like 9 minutes notice. This may not be any different. It may still be another couple fights until we see somebody in there with him that can actually do things that put him in bad positions and force him to suffer a loss. But that's why this is here.
I just have absolutely no care for it in this position. I mean,
nor I don't have a care for it largely as a fight. I'm yet to be impressed by Shara Bullet. It took into the third round to beat an absolutely exhausted Antonio Trocoli, who legitimately, as of Monday of fight week, was not his opponent, then flew to Saudi Arabia, cut a grip of weight, and stepped into the octagon. And for all of that, isn't a particularly good fighter. And still we were like, play about, can't really find stuff, finally get him out of here. Show me something this weekend, Shara.
Or don't, and then we don't have to pay any more attention.
Or don't, yeah, or don't, so we could just move on.
We will move on to what is an absolutely screaming fight, or potentially screaming fight, and that is Marlon Chito Vera versus Davison Figueiredo. Davison Figueiredo obviously now up at 135 pounds. My initial read on this is that both are of a similar they're of a similar cloth in that they both know how to play the rule set being impactful striking, impactful damage, immediately impactful damage scores first. Chito Vera, in the new era of MMA rules, has become sort of a cornerstone. That fight against Rob Font has become sort of a cornerstone that you look to when you're trying to decipher, coach, teach, learn the judging criteria. Davison Figueiredo, obviously at 125 pounds, had a very, very difficult weight cut for many, many years, has gotten into the latter stages of his career, 27 fights as a professional now, 28 this weekend, and chose that he didn't want to cut those extra 10 pounds. I think that's a very smart decision, and lands himself here in a very, 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 very interesting fight. Now, just very briefly before I chuck it over, I think the striking is going to be interesting because they both hit hard, both are tough, both are gritty, both are durable. You would like to think given the prowess that we've seen previously and the prowess that we've seen in his last performance, that Deiveson Figueiredo could likely take things to the ground here. But we also know that Moran Vera likes to put people in his close guard, likes to use those elbows with those over ties, likes to use collar ties to smash people from the bottom. And so if we do get some grappling exchanges here, I'm going to be very interested as to who comes out the victor. And I also think the other wrinkle, and then I'll throw it over, is the size difference here. In Deiveson Figueiredo's last fight out against Cody Garbrandt, who, I think going in, we all were relatively confident that Deiveson Figueiredo would come out with a win. It certainly was closer in the striking exchanges than I expected it to be. And then in the grappling exchanges, Deiveson Figueiredo did the things that I expect Deiveson Figueiredo to do. But we're looking at somebody in Marlon Vera who hits just as hard, if not harder, than somebody like Cody Garbrandt, is certainly more durable than somebody like Cody Garbrandt. But then there's still that sort of wrinkling question mark about the grappling. Thoughts, Mr. Kite?
For me, every single Chito Vera fight comes down to what do we get from Chito? Because there are moments where he's just too accepting of being on his back and being in bad positions. There are times where he is too reliant on, I will find the shot. And to his credit, he's found the shot many a times, right? Found the shot against Frankie Edgar. Found the shot against Dominic Cruz. Was losing the Rob Font fight in many rounds until he hammers something home in the dying seconds and swings the round because immediate damaging impact. He's coming off the championship loss to Sean O'Malley, where he didn't look particularly good, where he didn't fire all that much, where Jason Perillo yet again had to be up in his ass trying to get him going. And I think Deiveson Figueiredo, to his credit, has gotten to bantamweight and said, well, I don't have the power that I had down there, but I can wrestle, I can grapple. So let's use that. Let's do that. And so I'm going to be really interested to see how quickly he looks to grapple and then what kind of success he can have on the ground against Chito, who, as you said, is going to be looking to smash home elbows, is going to be looking to set up arm bars, is going to be looking to beat you up as much as he can while being accepting of being on bottom.
Absolutely. We go from what is an unbelievable contest to 0-10 in our last 10 fights between these two gentlemen. I don't say that to highlight any disrespect whatsoever. I do that to highlight the position that we are in the UFC right now with these two specific fighters. I'll just say my feelings and then we'll go from there. Tony Ferguson, 0-7 in his last 7 fights. Has been finished a grip at times, did not look good against Paddy Pimblett, did not look good against Michael Chandler, did not look good against Charles Oliveira, did not look good against Nate Diaz, did not look good against King Green, did not look good against Beneil Dariush, and got absolutely fucking demolished by Justin Gaethje. I don't understand why we are still booking Tony Ferguson. It may be because there are contractual obligations with which he has to be offered fights. That is a potential thing that has happened. But equally, I don't know why Michael Chiesa, on the flip side, I understand completely why Tony Ferguson's taking fights, but I do not understand why Michael Chiesa still feels the need to take fights. He is a very good analyst. He's a very good person on the desk on the UFC broadcast. He has managed to carve out for himself a very, very, very nice role that he is very good at. Loses to Vicente Luque, loses to Kevin Holland, loses to Sean Brady. These things happen in MMA. I think certainly at the height of his powers, we'd have been expecting him to beat somebody like Kevin Holland. To lose the way he did was disappointing, I think, for everyone involved. I have no understanding why this fight has been put together. I have no understanding as to why Michael Chiesa feels the need to fight and feels the need to continue to fight. But we are here. We are in the position that we are in. It is a fight that's going to happen. All I really wish, and the only real analysis that I will do, is that I hope that both men come out of this relatively well put together, relatively intact, and that they have at least answered the questions that they are trying to find from this specific fight. Spencer.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. The Tony Ferguson thing is starting to get, and it's weird to say, even more sad, but it's getting even more sad. We are at the point where someone, and I think we all said this after probably 3 fights ago, someone in his life needs to step in and just take charge and say, we're not doing this anymore. I don't care what you want. I don't care what all is going on. We're not doing this anymore. I didn't reach out to Mike Chiesa, who I have a good relationship with, because I want to leave it for now. My sense, my not even sense, my estimation is that he's looking to get a win, doesn't want to go out on 3 straight losses. You're 100% correct that he is an excellent analyst. He did some color commentary work on the Road to UFC earlier this year and was excellent. But those opportunities aren't, you just walk into them and they are all yours. They are doled out. There's a pecking order to things. And right now he's still the new guy on the block. And so I think it's a little bit of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so try to get 1 win to end it. These guys were supposed to fight years ago in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They are 2 of the last remaining Ultimate Fighter winners still competing. And so finally do it here. Please just nobody get hurt. That's it. Just nobody get hurt.
Indeed. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, the perfect thing is that one of them chokes the other out pretty quick.
100%. It's exactly what I was just thinking. Somebody gets taken down and submitted very quickly and woken up, and we all go home. And we're done, and we call it a day.
Indeed. Now, talking of potentially somebody getting taken down and put to sleep, we have Mackenzie Dern versus Lupe Godinez as the second fight into our main card. I mean, I have lots of angles to this. The first is that the grappling is going to be amazing. I also do wonder whether we're going to see grappling in this in the way that we think we are. I think Lupe Godinez has been sort of stop and start in her career thus far. We have seen spurts of just unbelievable fight IQ, athleticism, output, strength, wrestling, these sorts of things. And then we see her go in and just take completely unnecessary damage when she is far, far, far better of a grappler than some of her opponents. And she chooses to stand and she chooses to strike. And look, you and I have talked about this before, and I think the same is for Mackenzie Dern. There has to be a time when you get live reps of this stuff. It's all well and good doing stuff in the gym and sparring, and it's very, very difficult to know if you're getting a proper read from your opponent or not, from your sparring partner, I mean. When you're under the lights and the cage door closes and there's somebody ahead of you that has made the weight cut and done the things, you know you're getting real reps. But there is a time and a place for just getting smashed in the face. And I think for both of these women, there is a significant need to sort of have a more broader strategic output. Now, I think both women are still certainly improving. There's an interesting wrinkle here that Mackenzie Dern fights on Saturday, and then around 16 days later, she is scheduled to compete in a grappling super fight with arguably the best female alive right now in Welsh representative Ffion Davies over at Craig Jones Invitational. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what sort of damage she takes against somebody like Lupe Godinez as to whether she's even going to be able to compete in that specific bout. But in terms of storylines, in terms of how you think this fight can go, will go, what have you got?
So I hope, as always with Mackenzie Dern fights, that it is a grappling fest, that we get to see the multiple-time, multiple-discipline world champion do what she does best, which is attack, attack, attack from grappling positions. The trouble, as is often the case with standout grapplers, is that getting into those positions hasn't been a thing she's figured out quite how to do very well. And when we're on the feet, it's kind of sloppy. To her credit, gritty as all get out. There is no quit in this woman. We saw this in the Amanda Lemos fight at UFC 298, where she gets beat up for 2 rounds and then goes on the offensive because she's able to withstand and press and wins the 3rd round, but it isn't enough to get the finish. I doubt there has been any changes. At some point, you know, you got to just go, this is who she is. And so There's room for Lupe Godinez to land bigger shots because she is a big, powerful, strong boxer as well. There's probably room for her. And I think she will be wise coming out of the Brna fight to keep some distance and let's just use these here strikes, because last time we were in with a very good grappler, it didn't go well. So let's just try to punch her in the face and use our wrestling defensively and tactically to get up and get out of things and get away and just box. We'll see how it goes. It's super interesting to me what you said about Mackenzie Dern jumping into a super fight with Fionn Davis. Really weird that it's booked. I know she was initially sort of looking at ADCCs, which is one of those, like, it's another one of these things where you can't be halfway pregnant. Like, you're either doing this or you're not. And so if you're thinking about maybe it's time to go back to grappling where everybody still thinks I'm royalty and loves me and I don't get punched in the face as much and I don't lose as often, cool. Totally understood. Makes a lot of sense. But you got to just go, because you can't prepare for a grappling match 14 days later and have to deal with Lupe Godinez, who's coming off a loss, who wants to show I'm better than I've been in these inconsistent moments. So let's just see. Saturday, this is the one that I'm most interested in outside of the main event.
I agree. Something that we're definitely going to see some grappling in is going to be Joel Alvarez versus Elvis Brenner. Elvis Brenner is a bit of an enigma at 155 pounds, to be honest. You know, comes in and has just such a strange fight against Zubaira Tukugov, goes out and has the craziest comeback victory against Guram Kutateladze, then goes out and just decimates Kainan Krachewski, and then just so fucking weirdly goes out against Muktabek Orobayal and
shits the bed.
And just absolutely shits the bed. Like, 6-year-old after watching Scream 3 shits the bed.
And look, not to take anything away from Oralbai, who is a good fighter and a good wrestler and did well in that fight, but like, what we expect of Elvis Brenner just was nowhere to be found.
100%.
And after going 3-0 in your rookie year, you're not allowed to walk out in the first start of your sophomore campaign and be like, yeah, that guy wasn't who I am.
Yeah, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. And I mean, like, the fight that was cancelled before Muktabek Orobai would have been Esteban Ribovic, which would have been just absolutely fucking unbelievable altogether. But
for anybody that is upset that Daniel Zellhuber and Esteban Ribovic is on the Noche UFC pay-per-view main card, get all the way fucked right now, because when it's done, you're all going to be singing its praises and how fucking awesome it was. So record when I'm telling you this and come back to me with your thank yous in September.
So on the other side of that card, on the other side of that fight, sorry, is Joel Alvarez, somebody who I think has been criminally unfortunate. In that makes his first outing under the promotion against Demiris Magulov, who I was extremely high on and I think is criminally underrated. Then goes out and beats the fuck out of Daniela Bonaldo, beats the fuck out of Joe Duffy, which is just an insane achievement altogether. Alexander Yakovlev was somebody super experienced at the time, goes out and just destroys him. Unfortunately, misses weight for that one, misses weight for Thiago Moises, but just decimates Thiago Moises, who's a very, very, very good fighter. Then runs into just somebody named Arman Saryukin, and sometimes these things happen in MMA, and then Darce chokes Mark Diakese. Now, there's a slight asterisk among that Mark Diakese fight in that there was an accidental clash of heads that the referee did not see. We then end up at a Darce choke, and you know, these things happen in MMA. That is certainly was unfortunate for Mark Diakese, specifically that it led to his removal from the UFC roster. But here we then had 2 bouts cancelled for Joel Alvarez in Ludovic Klein and then Mateusz Rebecki, and then we land Elvis Brenner. Like, on paper, Joel Alvarez absolutely destroys Elvis Brenner, and this is not going to be close. Elvis Brenner is somebody that has not shown us the level that would beat somebody like a Mark Diakese or a Thiago Moises, for instance, or would even last 2 rounds against somebody like Arman Saryukin. But Elvis Brenner has an element of absolute fucking wild man in him that, okay, we didn't see last time, but it's certainly in there. And so having this fight as the opener to your main card is very, very smart. Very, very, very smart. Way smarter than whatever the fuck was going on with that co-main event. What do you have thoughts-wise on this fight?
Yeah, Yoel Alvarez is a guy that I'm super fascinated by. I wish we saw him more frequently. I wish there weren't visa issues and injury issues and whatever there is that's holding him up from competing more regularly. It looks like the weight issues from those back-to-back fights have been dealt with. He is 6'1" and super long, which makes him crazy interesting for this division. If he is at his best, I agree. This is a go out and just smash this dude and choke him out and make a statement that you want to be back in the top 15 sometime soon. But Elvis Brenner has that dog in him, to use the much overused phrase. He has that, you're going to have to kill me. We saw that in the Guram Kutateladze fight where, you know, the Georgian Viking is up doing well, looks great. We all think he's going to smash this kid. And Brenner just hangs around and gets cut and his hair's, you know, it's bleached for Shoot the Box Diego Lima. And then it's Ric Flair back in the 80s in the NWA where he, you know, gets cut and the white blonde turns into pink and red. And he comes back and just melts this dude with pressure and relentlessness. So it could be super entertaining as a main card opener. Sign me up. Give me fights like this. Like, come on. These are the ones that a lot of people probably don't know or give enough credit to either man. It's going to be dope.
I'm saying it right now. The timelines match up. If Joel Alvarez goes out there and manages to beat the brakes off Elvis Brenner, Paddy Pimblett, Joel Alvarez is the absolute fucking fight to make. It is the fucking fight to make. Anyway.
I agree with you, but I don't think they'll do it because Joel Alvarez is A, dangerous, B, not a name. I think they continue to give Paddy Pimblett names that he can beat.
Sure. I'm not going to argue. Alonzo Menefeld, Azamat Murzakanov, Mohamed Yahya, Caio Fernandez, Shamil Gadziev, Dontel Mays. Fair play to you all. Good luck on Saturday. We're going to start and stop our prelim coverage at Guram Kutateladze versus Jordan Vucenic. Unfortunately, Guram Kutateladze lost Abdul Karim Al-Sawadi via injury relatively recently. Jordan Vucenic came off a blistering win in his 155-pound debut against some fella that Ian Dean very, very, very bravely brought in to fight him in London. And it was a clinic. Jordan barely got touched, finished a guillotine very, very quickly in round one, looked fantastic in doing it. Makes a very difficult step up in competition to the big show against somebody like Guram Kutateladze. Just as a very, very brief introduction for, if anyone has watched this program or is watching this program and does not know about Jordan Vucenic, I am shocked. But Jordan Vucenic is and has been the Cage Warriors 145-pound champion. He was involved in a trilogy of fighters, between a triptych of fighters, if you will, between Morgan Charrier, who is now a 145-pound fighter in the UFC, Paul Hughes, who is now in the PFL European Series, and himself. Three unbelievable fighters at regional level, really, really shone in the Cage Warriors promotion. And it was a real golden era of that 145-pound division for Cage Warriors when the three of them were contesting in it. It has been long overdue, I think, for sure, for Jordan Vucenic to get this step up to the UFC. I do think and hope that the UFC will match him favorably, irregardless of what happens against Guram Kutateladze. I think, as we have discussed, it is a tough fight for somebody like Guram Kutateladze. But there is one thing that Jordan Vucenic and Elvis Brenner have in common, and that's that they've got the fucking dog in them. They absolutely have the dog in them. If you go back and watch Jordan Vucenic versus Paul Hughes 1 or 2, Jordan Vucenic versus Morgan Charrier, Jordan Vucenic in any of his Cage Warriors wins, you will see his ability to withstand, his ability to turn from being the nail to the hammer in some of those situations, and other times just being the hammer. He's got some really lovely boxing, some good footwork, some good head movement, and he can grapple. So definitely tune in for this one. What are your specific thoughts on Jordan Vucenic as somebody that obviously focuses highly on the UFC and then sort of peters in and around of the global architecture of MMA?
I mean, super excited, as you said, when you get a situation like we had in Cage Warriors, where it's Vucenic, Chedier, and Paul Hughes, and they're trading titles and interim belts and series, and I fight you, then you fight him, then I fight you, and then I fight him, and it's just great fights all around. You certainly come to understand, obviously, working with and knowing you guys as closely as I do at SevereMMA. I've heard about all of these athletes and then take it upon myself when I get good recommendations from people I respect and trust who say, no, you got to pay attention. I then pay attention. I'm super excited that he is here. I was pumped when it came across my email that he had filled in this fight. He is one of these people, and I touch on these guys regularly when it happens. He is moving up. And so regardless of what happens on Saturday, circle the name, highlight the name, whatever you have to do, squirrel the name away, because when he goes back to 45, you will see the fuller version of him. And I do believe he will go to 45. I think that's where he knows he is at his best. I think Cage Warriors, the last time out, it was let's just get a fight and whatever. It's a tough fight, but it's certainly a winnable fight. It's a fight where you can go out and have some success. Guram Kutsataladze has had a couple of good performances, a couple of not great performances. Jordan Vucenic is tough as nails. So let's just see if he can go out there and, have been in good shape for his win just a few weeks ago. Hopefully stayed pretty fit, stayed in the gym, got this opportunity. Let's go see if he can make the most of it. And as I said, regardless, cannot wait to see him back at 45.
100%. Victoria Dudakova fights Sam Hughes at 115 pounds. Hopefully that fight goes well for both women. And Cedric Dumas opens us up for the card at 185 pounds versus Dennis Talulin. The last fight that we will stop on is Jai Herbert making his return to the UFC octagon against Rolando Bedoya. Obviously, Jai Herbert unfortunately drops his last fight to Faris Ziam. It's been very, very stop-start for Jai Herbert, 2-4-1 in his last 7. Sorry. This fight against Rolando is an absolute must win for Jai Herbert. This is something that, Rolando also on a must win, loses to Chaos Williams, loses to Song Kenan. These things could sometimes happen in MMA. It's good matchmaking in that they're sort of both on the same trajectory, both of a similar skill level. But I do think, and unfortunate as it is, when we just list the people that Jai Herbert has fought, he loses Francisco Trinaldo in his debut after beating the brakes off Trinaldo for most of that fight, and then drops it. Hanato Moicano was a very, very, very difficult out to take next. Karma Worthy looks great against him, then turns into, just happens to be the 145-pound champion in Ilia Topuria, goes out and beats up Carl Nelson pretty convincingly. A decision draw against Ludovic Klein in what was a weird fight over and back. Faris Ziam is a good prospect, and sometimes these things do happen. I think when you group those names together, I'm pretty sure that's a win that will age pretty well for Faris Ziam. But at 36 for Jai Herbert, this is something that just absolutely needs to start turning the wheels in a favorable direction for his career. Thoughts on this fight specifically?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think you touched on most of it. It is absolutely must win. It is the most clearly winnable fight that he's had in a while. I would say back to Kyle Nelson, and even Kyle Nelson since then is unbeaten since then. That is turning into a better win than it was. Rolando Bedoya is another one of these guys that sort of impressed us in his debut against Chaos Williams, goes the distance, split decision. Many people thought he won that fight. And then he comes out in the second fight against Song Kenan, and it's start well and then just fade to where the Chinese veteran is able to just be like, cool, I'll hang around through the tough round and then I'll just beat you up. And so if Jai Herbert can hang around through the tough round, let's get through the first part and then have some success. Keep yourself off the fence, keep yourself out of clinch situations, use all of that length. This is a guy that's going to be willing to stand and trade with you from what we have seen thus far and expect of Rolando Bedoya. And so just go out there and do the things that made you Cage Warriors champion and a guy that we were excited to see in the UFC in the first place.
Absolutely. That rounds us up for UFC Fight Night Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov and co. Overall, I think it's a decent card. Main card is absolutely fantastic. There are some names on that prelims, as we have discussed, that are of interest to us. I will repeat because I just have to. A fucking weird co-main event, but you know, these things do happen in MMA. Spencer and I will be back next week to break down this card and what is truly a horrific card the week after, with Marcin Tybura versus Sergey Spivak and number 2. But we will get there, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night. Enjoy the main event. Enjoy that fantastic main card. And we will see you next time.